Thank you, and welcome to today's webinar on managing licensing agreements and royalty processing. I'm Tawana Dyer, Alliance Director at Apps Associates. I'm fortunate to be joined today by Fran Daly and JD Fauerstein. Fran is the Senior Director of the Life Sciences Practice for Apps Associates, and JD is a Senior Business Analyst and Functional Specialist for Fidel. I thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to review a few logistics before the session today is being recorded. Your lines are on mute and your questions can be submitted through the chat. We will answer those throughout the end of the session as we get closer to that. The agenda today, Fran and JD will provide the industry background and a business case and solutions demonstration in the session on managing licensing agreement and royalty processing. We will then end the webinar with Q&A and closing remarks. Before we begin the session, I would like to give you an introduction to both companies. Apps Associates was founded in 2002. We have over 875 employees worldwide with offices in the United States, India, and Germany. We are recognized as an Oracle to Cloud leader, and we have deep expertise in all things Oracle. With an extensive life sciences customer base, industry-specific solutions, and extensions for life sciences, we are excited to partner with Fidel. Fidel was founded in 2003 with offices in the United States and France. They are a leader in rights and royalty management software. They have award-winning rights and royalty cloud solutions. They empower companies to make the most of their content and innovations. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Fran.
Thanks, Tawana. Okay, let's get started with a little bit of humor here. What would a webinar be without a little bit of humor? So we actually have some royalty humor here. So hopefully, you all are not familiar with this one, haven't seen it before. Royalty humor. Cartoons can be a little hard to find, and I'll have you know that true to today's theme, we paid for this, the royalties on this cartoon for the intellectual property rights to use it. So I hope you at least got a chuckle out of that. But okay, let's move along to the next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so just a little bit of background on the industry before we get into the solution. I know folks will be interested in seeing that. Don't want to spend too much time here, but just to set the stage a little bit. I think, Tufts University it was last year that did a study. It actually is estimated to be about $2.6 billion to bring a single new drug to market. It's just an enormous amount of money. And, usually it's quite a long timeline as well, 7 to 10 years. And, it takes more than a village. It takes, a large community out there. It takes the big companies and the small companies, right? So, the big pharma companies in particular are looking to fill their pipeline with new innovative solutions. About 10 years ago, the pipeline of new products each year that was approved was about 30% small biotech firms. Last year, it's close to 70%. So the innovation is coming from the small, nimble biotech firms, diagnostic firms using biotechnology, cell editing firms. There's just all the thought leadership is really coming from the smaller firms in this space. And I'm talking about, big pharmaceuticals in particular. And our solution demonstration is based on a theoretical fabricated pharmaceutical company. But it applies to more than just pharmaceuticals, right? It's medical device as well. The same sort of trends are happening. Large companies assisting the small companies. Large companies have more wherewithal, capital, sales force, ability to market the products. So we see it in med device. We're also seeing it, suppliers who have technology that can be used within the medical industry. They're of great interest to these large companies as well. So there's a lot taking place there, collaboration-wise. I'm sure everyone's seen the news of the new COVID drug, right? The first one coming out from Pfizer and BioNTech collaboration. And that's really just one example of what's going on all across the industry. Last year alone, there were some 600 deals totaling close to $13 billion, collaborations between large life science companies and small biotech and med device companies. So it's for development of the drugs and devices, but it's also for the marketing and promotion. These companies really need to collaborate quite a bit. And what that involves is some complex deals, really. There's typically royalties based on sales, right? So when the drug is finally, or device is probably finally approved, there's royalties that have to be paid out to the owner of the intellectual property, and they can be geography based. Oh, excuse me, I think my email's coming up or something. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so they can be geography based as well. So a larger company might have the ability to market the product outside the US, for example, and help with that. There's often milestone payments. The smaller company needs some money to complete the development of the drug, and also for the phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trial efforts, which can be quite costly. Investors are typically looking for some sales of the product, but they're also looking for equity in the smaller company as well. So we're seeing a lot of hybrid deals out there. So they can be quite complex. We saw a couple of deals like this, large ones last month. Roche Pharmaceuticals making a deal with Atia on an antiviral drug similar to Gilead's remdesivir, which is being used in the treatment of COVID right now. And we see quite a few of our clients, frankly, with rich uncles invested, and assisting with the development of drugs for these and devices for these, for these new needs. So it's getting complex. That's pretty much the case here. So can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So okay. So it's complex, and there's a lot of money involved. What's the business case around doing this? Why can't I do this in Excel? I've been doing it in Excel. Well, when you think about the magnitude of the money involved, it's, a mistake could be, quite costly. Over and under payments of royalties, could also lead to, violations and fines, that sort of thing. So that's, obviously big impact consequence to getting the numbers wrong. Companies are looking to forecast better. There's been lots of new regulations in the last couple of years around revenue recognition, and forecasting is always of interest to Wall Street and these companies. So the ability to forecast your revenue from and the royalties expenses is something that an automated solution can provide, which you may not be getting in your Excel or whatever I'm using today. Whatever you're using, which is, again, typically Excel, wouldn't normally be integrated in any way with your back-end systems, right? So you can't, feed the invoices due or receivable into your, general ledger and payable systems, receivable systems. You don't really have visibility in your legacy systems as to what's driving this perhaps large component in your financials. And you don't really have the tool to accurately and consistently calculate and validate the royalty amounts. So, none of that really exists with most, ERP solutions today, which is kind of why we've got this new solution for you, which integrates royalty management as sort of a subledger within Oracle Financials. So, that's sort of the, the business case for it. It's becoming more complex. It costs a lot of money. You don't have the integration and controls that you probably need. The next slide, please. Yeah, so what can you expect to get out of this if you implement a combined royalty solution within Oracle Financials? Well, first of all, improve efficiency, right? So stop playing around with the multiple manual spreadsheets and duplicate rekeying of information. You can generate some things automatically. You can get some visibility to these arrangements and their terms, and what's coming up in terms of your financial forecasts. Improve your accuracy, as we were saying earlier, right? We got a central repository. It's locked and loaded. These are the terms. It's going to generate the the financials related to these royalties or milestone payments, and we can use automation and computer programs to validate, load the data that's needed to calculate the royalties. So accuracy, improved internal controls is another area, right? You'll have an audit trail of why this payment took place. I'm sure your auditors will love that. You'll get some role-based approval processes coming out of your payable systems, right? We can talk a little bit more about that later on. Better integration, between the back end and the royalty subledger, if you will. And, lastly, as we were saying earlier, improved forecasting. So these are some of the benefits that we expect you to gain as someone or some company that invests in this type of solution. So that's my little background speech here. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to JD so he can take you through some of the exciting details.
All right. Thank you, Fran. Appreciate that. We want to just jump right into it here. If you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so let's just take a moment to really talk about some of the core features and benefits of the IPM Suite application. First and foremost, the ability to manage both inbound and outbound licensing. Let's go back one. And what I mean by that is in every licensing deal, we have typically a licensee, somebody that's receiving intellectual property, and a licensor, somebody that's giving intellectual property to somebody. So the examples that we have here is licensing in compounds, patents, medical devices by a biotech, pharmaceutical, or med device company, and they can then use that intellectual property to then license that out, or if they have their own intellectual property, they can license that out and monetize that. Our platform is capable of managing both simultaneously from an end-to-end perspective. And with that, it also includes the various financials associated to those two flows. We want to go to the next slide. So from a high-level perspective, what does that mean? Well, if we break it down by a module-to-module and function-to-function capability, again, taking a best-of-breed approach, we can see in the red here we have Oracle data points, and then in the blue we have IPM Suite, and within that, the various modules, features, and capabilities. From a integration perspective, starting over on the top left where we have licensing rights management, we take in master data. We typically integrate that into the system, really to respect data integrity, as well as maintaining a single source of truth for easy management of that rights information and that data information. We pull that into our deal management module. That's where you're going to have the ability to create rights, manage your rights, create and maintain rates, as well as payment schedules. And then it can also flow through and pair nicely with our own forecasting module that can be leveraged to create complex forecasting models. And then from there, any of that information can move forward into the Oracle Financial and Budgeting platform. Moving over to the right, we have sales, RX data, and royalty reports. That information, that unique sales information, can be ingested into the application and go through a data cleanup, data processing, and ultimately a transaction validation. What I mean by that is we're going to compare what was defined on our deals within our rights, rates, and payment information and see if that matches the sales information that has come in. And when we do, we're going to get, if it does, we'll get a one-to-one result saying, yes, this does match. If it doesn't, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into the demo, but if it doesn't, you then have full visibility and ultimately further transparency in decision-making on how you want to proceed on either correcting those transactions that do not meet the license contract agreement terms, and if you want to make exceptions, you can do so. Moving from there to the royalty management side, we have our royalty calculations, our statements, and our forecast true-up. The royalty calculation we spoke a little bit, just a bit on, where we have that transaction information coming in, going through that validation, ultimately generating the statements, or rather the invoices to be paid. And then the forecast true-up. Again, we have that new sales information that we can then apply to our previous forecast modules. All of the invoices, the payments, the accruals, all of these transactional information does eventually get fed over to Oracle Cloud Financials. And from there, any sort of invoice number that's generated, customer account information, credit memos, anything like that, that gets executed by Oracle Cloud Financials does also come back into IPM to maintain that level of continuity that so many companies are looking for nowadays. And then lastly, when everything has been managed from a transaction perspective and any sort of adjustments made to your rights and rates information, once all of the statements and invoices have been generated, the various licensors can log in using a self-service framework on our statement portal and access their statements real-time as they are getting posted. They can review and download various reports associated to those statements, as well as request any updates to payment preference information. And then that is also all tied to our reporting structure. We have our data using a secure line within IPM, a viewpoint to see all of the information that is either being entered into IPM Suite or managed within IPM Suite that can be exposed to then leverage both out-of-the-box reports that we have, as well as having the ability to connect to third-party business reporting platforms, whatever your preference might be. Next slide. So that was a lot. Let's just take a moment to talk about a typical use case scenario. And we have one here that we've defined. Just like the subject line says, let's make a deal. We have, in this scenario, we have two parties involved in this deal. We have Zinc Pharmaceuticals and Panancin Antibiotic. Zinc Pharmaceuticals and Expansion Pharma. Zinc Pharmaceuticals is playing the role of the licensor, and Expansion Pharma, leveraging IPM Suite, is the licensee. They're going to be licensing in that antibiotic to use for their own products. They have made a deal with Zinc Pharmaceutical for $1 million equity investment. They also have agreed to an 11% royalty to be paid out to Zinc Pharmaceutical on European sales, as well as defined 3 different milestone payments, one for $2 million on FDA approval for phase 1 clinical trials, followed by a $4 million FDA approval for phase 2 clinical trials, and a $7 million for EMA approval on phase 3 clinical trials in Europe. So we've taken this deal and we've created that within the IPM Suite application. So let's just walk through what that looks like. So next slide. So what we're seeing here is the actual representation of that deal information being put together and transposed onto our deal management application, our module, and within that, what we call a deal or your agreements. We can see, starting in the top left, we have the deal type. This is a licensing deal type. We can support several different deal types. We can see who we're dealing with, what kind of currency we're operating in. We do support multi-currency. And then ultimately what the deal status is. The deal status meaning this has been signed, executed, and fully booked. And then below that, we're able to capture all sorts of different types of information. The one that we're highlighting here is that $1 million equity that we're able to capture as well. Everything that happens within this screen and the subsequent screens that are going to follow is fully trackable, auditable, and we can do various comparisons based off of changes that have been done as well. It just helps ultimately with providing that full visibility and transparency into managing the data within the application. So let's go to the next slide. So here, what we're looking at is the associated products or the SKUs to the intellectual property that has been agreed to be licensed in from Zinc Pharmaceuticals. We want to move to the next slide. And within here, we're taking that information that we've taken from the licensing agreement, the various intellectual properties, how they're ultimately going to be leveraged, the SKUs, and we're tying them to payments. Here we can see those 3 payments that I mentioned earlier within our scenario, that $2 million, $4 million, and $7 million amounts. Next slide. And then with that, we're looking at the various royalty rates that we have also defined. The example we had was a 11% net sales based on European sales, but we also do support a variety of other types of rates out of the box. And in order for us to kind of get an idea as to what that looks like, let's jump over to the next slide. When we pair our rights information with our rate information, we're left with a huge level of flexibility in capturing complex scenarios and calculations in a very easy, straightforward manner. We can templatize them, and we can really ultimately assign a variety of different values. But I want to take a moment to really talk about what that means from a calculation and management perspective. Every equation has three basic values or properties. And let's just go through what those three are and how they relate to our application. So we want to just hit the next three. We have our value, our operator, and our rate bases. So in the example of this rate being that 11% of net sales that we'd agreed upon as a flat rate, we have our value being the 11, our operator being the percent, and our net sales being the rate basis. So when we do bring in sales information, our system is going to validate it, make sure that it's within the terms that we have agreed upon with Zinc Pharmaceuticals, and then apply this calculation. And that calculation will look like the following. We hit the next, so it will be, as the example being 11% of 2.5 million. So we'll see that number again represented later on, but if we hit the next slide, we'll take a look at that number being represented here within our statement generations. So just to be clear, we have gone over our deal header information where we're able to capture all of the various rights and rates and payment information, how we're able to structure the various rights information and tie that to specific things like milestone payments, how we're able to take unique values from a rates perspective and define that within the application. The example we had on the previous screen was net sales, and we can see that being represented here based off of that $2.5 million amount. However, we can use other types of values, whatever it might be in terms of from a unique calculation perspective, whether it's units sold, whether it is a gross margin, whatever that ultimate value that you're calculating against. All we need is to be able to take that information that you're providing us and fit that into that rate basis and then calculate it. If there is more complexity, we do have the ability to capture that complexity within the application, and ultimately as the data, the sales information is coming in, we calculate against that, and we're ending up with this net result of the generated statement within the application. So here, your royalty accountants can have a huge level of access and transparency and visibility into the data that's being brought in, ensure that you're within compliance post-validation, and then any adjustments that they need to make, they can do so here. So as an example, if you wanted to make an adjustment to this statement amount, you can do so real time here. Or if you know, as an example, that there's going to be an adjustment on the next statement period, you can actually schedule that in advance. So you no longer have to use that post-it note or that reminder, that push notification reminder that you've scheduled. You can just schedule that and then set it, and just like Ronco, forget it and move on with the next day-to-day action item that you might have. So what we're looking at is seeing the final statement transaction generated. And then let's go over to the next slide, where we'll pass it off here to Fran and see what it looks like after that transaction has been generated and pushed over to Oracle Cloud Financials. Fran?
Yeah, thanks, JD. Yeah, so this is the Oracle Financials payable screen with some, just key stats of what's opening, pending, that sort of thing for the user who's logged in at the top of the screen here. This is kind of a search screen, and so we've put in some search criteria and found this one royalty invoice payment that you see on the bottom of the screen. And we would, you typically, if we click on the details of this, we'll see that number. So that details of that invoice number. So next slide, please. Yeah, so here's a header screen, invoice header screen, and then some a couple of tabs at the bottom. There's like, I think, 4 tabs there, right? We'll start with the first one. So yeah, this very robust payable system from Oracle. It can handle different functional currencies, transaction currencies, payment types, right? You can do check, wire, draft, European draft, electronic funds transfer. So lots of different flexibility there. The approval process as well can be based on any single or combination of attributes of the header or the detailed lines. It's a nice solution. Can even do optical character recognition if you have scanned in paper invoices. That's not our example here today, but some of the features of Oracle payables. So at the bottom, we see the one invoice for the 238,000 GBP. And so if there were more lines, that would be displayed as well. And then we'll go on and look at the approvals on the next screen, please. Right, so here's a list of the approvals. Can tell you, who initiated the approval process, and then all the people in the row and what their status is in the queue rather for approval. If there were holds for some reason, sometimes suppliers might have a hold because of some other issue, they would appear here as well. And then the next screen will show you the actual payment. Here's payment number 36, if you will, test system. To Zinc Pharmaceuticals with a 238,000. And I think that's about it on the payable side. Next screen, please. All right, JD.
All right, thank you, Fred. So what we just saw was the various payables being managed within Oracle Cloud Financials. And if you recall back to that previous screen that we had the diagram with, we had that bidirectional flow between Oracle Cloud Financials and IPM. So we pushed it to Oracle Cloud Financials, it was managed there, and now it's being brought back where we have the ability to take our invoicing information from Oracle, have that represented within IPM Suite, as well as have a sub-GL-like viewpoint into all the various transactions that have taken place related to the associated deals. And here we have an example of 2 such transactions. We have that milestone payment, as well as below that the royalty expense payment amount as well, that net amount of 284,000. So if we go to the next slide. So from there, after we've gone through our full transaction process, again, your licensors will be able to access their statement information by logging securely onto that statement portal and being able to generate any sort of reports that they're requesting, download any sort of PDFs of the statements themselves for their own records, as well as make any sort of additional requests for payment preference updates and information such as that. And then ultimately for the next slide, again, using our secure reporting views that we provide, reports can be generated using either third-party reporting platforms where you can sort of mix and match and manipulate the data to generate those reports that you're looking for, or use our own reporting platform with reports that are generated out of the box. All right.
So with that, I would like to open it up to question and answer. So Carla, if you would open up the lines, that would be fantastic. I do know we had one question that came in earlier, so JD or Fran will let you field that question, whoever it falls to. The question is, what information will we be able to forecast?
Yep. So I can take that. So so you'll be able to forecast your current month royalties due, as well as future months and periods, and you'll be able to do that obviously by product, by supplier, by company, legal entity, et cetera. So quite a bit of visibility to future royalty revenues or expenses.
Okay, great. And then I do have a second question here. What type of information do you provide within your statement portal?
So I'll take that. So in terms of the data points, again, it's going to be information related to the licensor. So the licensor is going to be able to see their full royalty amounts all the way from generated to current date. And again, they'll be able to download that information. They'll also be able to access any sort of reports that they'd like to have related to that statement history information.
Okay, great. Here's a question. How long does it take to move information from Fidel to Oracle or vice versa?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So we're using Oracle Integration Cloud, OIC, to manage the exchange of information back and forth between Fidel and Oracle components. And that really can be scheduled however you like. It can be as quickly as a few minutes. It could be once an hour. It could be once an evening, whatever makes sense for companies using the software. It's very robust in terms of the integration, the administration of it. If you'll be notified when things, administrator will be notified when things when information is moved from one side to another. If there's issues, it's captured they'll be notified of that as well. And there's a job log, a history log of all the steps that take place within that. So it's a nice tool from Oracle to enable real-time or batch interfaces through across these systems.
Great, thanks, Fran. So I have one last question on the chat, and then I'll actually go to the lines as well. Can I have licensing arrangements for both partners that my company owes royalties to and partners who owe monies to my company?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, earlier on in the presentation, we spoke about the ability to manage the full end-to-end flow of both an inbound license as well as an outbound license. That does directly translate to outbound payments, because you owe somebody based off of the intellectual property you've licensed in. You owe them more likely than not either a flat fee or a royalty, as well as being able to track and manage the royalties that are owed to you as a licensor from your licensees.
Thank you all, everybody, for we'll come back to questions too, but thank you for joining us today. And we appreciate JD and Fran giving us the overview of managing licensing agreements and royalty processing. Today, our goal was to show you the power of this solution and to let you know how Apps Associates and Fidel can assist you with royalty management solutions and extensions for Oracle Cloud Financials, obviously helping to streamline that calculation, verification, and processing of royalty payments to your supply and chain partners. Again, special thanks to our presenters today, Fran and JD. Please don't forget to register for the complimentary consultation that both teams are offering. In your invite, you did have the opportunity to register. And then if you have questions, feel free to send us an email at contacts@appsassociates.com. We'll be happy to help you sign up for the program.